All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for this event with Patricia M Boardman. My name is Larissa Disler. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at the Galena Public Library in Galena, Illinois. I will let Patricia take over here. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I mean, it's really exciting. And when I was writing the book, I just started with my own hometown area, and so most of the book is set in Iowa and in Clayton County, and some of it in Dubuque. And one of the characters is in Chicago, and so then we stop off in Galena, and I wrote a little bit about Galena in there because it's always such a fun place. And when you go home, you don't ever go home without going to Galena. It's a wonderful historic place, and I'm proud of the area that I'm from, and so I'm excited always to share things with them and get them excited about coming to see us. So, um, all right. So I didn't know if there was going to be questions or how it was going to be. So, um, most people ask me when, as I've been going through this process, most of them ask me, "Oh, you must have always written. You must have written all the time. You were just writing, writing, writing." And it's like, no. So I had a very different journey, and I look at this whole thing as just a journey, and it's going to continue on when we die. And so I'm just going to learn all I can. And I I didn't start out writing. In fact, I was a poor student, and I didn't do that well, and I didn't read that much really. And I would see people, I'd say, "Oh, I love reading. I love reading. I got to get home and get a book." And it just wasn't me. And I just looked at those words on the page, and I just thought it just seemed like a bunch of gibberish to me. And I only read when I had to, or if it was about a horse. If it was about a horse, I'm reading that book, especially if it's got a lot of pictures in it. So, so I no, I really just I didn't write that much or anything. But then when I turned 19, then I just sat down. I wanted to know something, and I sat down, I read a book, and I never stopped. I was just a voracious reader after that. And I don't know, it's probably partially our childhood or whatever. It's partially my personality, I suppose. But so probably should have written down some notes. Um, so I would say that when I was in high school, though, what I did like to do, I like to be funny. So I used to like to write these funny letters, and I would get Mad magazines. And my girlfriends and I, none of us had any money, you know how we were in the old days, and so we go down, we get a magazine, and then we just cut pictures out, and we paste them on, and then we'd write funny letters to each other, and we'd make up funny names. You know, my initials were PB, and then you'd come up with weird names, and we just were amusing ourselves, which is something the kids don't even know today, which is kind of sad, I think. But there was a funny story about that in my writing. So I used to write these letters, and when I was 18, I met this guy, and I thought, oh, I really like him. I think I'll just write him one of my letters. And so I would just take some facts and then weave a bunch of airy nonsense and silly stuff into it. And so I wrote him this letter, and then I was left for school the next day, and I told my sister, she was going to the local grade school at the St. Columkills. I said, "Look, there used to be a little mailbox there." I said, "What, stick this in the mailbox for me." And then we left for school. And then we came home, and I said, "Oh, did you get the letter in the box?" And she went, "Oh." And I said, "What does that mean? Oh, what do you mean?" And she started to really scare me. And then she said, "I dropped it." And I said, "What do you mean you dropped it? Why weren't you careful? Where did you put it?" She said, "Oh no, it's I don't know. I don't know where I dropped it. And it's only a block and a half from our house." So I ran out and said, "Well, you're gonna help me. We're gonna go find that letter." And I was going up and down. Now this is November. There were leaves everywhere, just piled up in the gutters in people's yards. And so I gotta find that letter. If anybody opens it, I'm gonna be humiliated. So I was digging around all these leaves and all these yards for a block, and I never found it. I thought, okay, some kid picked it up, and I'm just going to be dead meat. They're just going to, ridicule me for the rest of my life. And so I went home and I tried to get over my embarrassment. And I thought, you know what? The most tragic thing about this is now this guy's going to get the letter. So I thought, I don't want to write all that again. And then I looked over at the trash barrel, and it was filled with these these wads of paper. So I pulled all of them out, flattened them all out, and I reconstructed the whole letter, glued more pictures on it, and then I mailed it myself. And anyway, so you jump forward 5 years. And I was married. I married the guy, and then I had two kids, and we were sitting at the table, and I invited the missionaries over to have dinner with us. And my sister used to come and live with me in the summer because it was just a better environment than it was at home. And so anyway, she was with me there, and so the missionaries looked at us and said, "So how did you two meet?" And my mind was just kind of blank, actually. I was feeding the kids and stuff, and then Dan said, "Well, it all started with this letter." And it's so bizarre. And and he said it was a very strange letter. And I just read it and I thought, I think I'm just going to set this aside and just kind of pretend I didn't get it. And so anyway, then he said, but then the weirder thing happened. 2 days later, I got the exact same letter. And I was looking at him and I started to say, I didn't send you two of those letters. What are you talking about? And I said, I sent it with Chris and she lost the, and then I looked at Chris and I was like, oh my, are you, are you kidding me? You mailed that letter? And she had this horrible guilty look on her face. I couldn't believe she did that to me. And anyway, yeah. So I don't really have a sister anymore. I really wanted to kill her. But anyway, but I got the guy anyway at the time. So it was pretty funny. And and then as time moved on, that was the only kind of writing I ever did, but it was always tied with humor somehow. But then something really significant happened. Roots came out, and Roots just changed my life because when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been doing this genealogy for, I don't know, I've been doing it for like 10 years when Roots came out. And I thought, I would really like to write a story like that about my whole family coming to America, the whole thing. And it really excited me. And so I did want to be a writer at that point, but I thought I don't really have enough story. I thought my lines only go back to about 1833. And in those days, we'd have computers. We just went to courthouses, and that's how I was getting all the information through, traveling to a town, going through their newspapers and all of that. So it was expensive and it was very time consuming and it was hard with kids. They don't want to sit still when you're in a courthouse going through documents. So it was really hard. And anyway, 2 years after that, Centennial came out. And then I went, oh my gosh, somebody already did what I was thinking about. And I just love that show. And I still watch it, even though it's kind of a little dated. The style's a little dated, but the content of the story was beautiful. And I mean, I've never read the book, but Centennial, but I watch the show almost every year because I just love it. We love those characters. And back then, I think it was in 27 episodes. And and it took them 2 years to play that on TV. They would just play some one season, and then you had to wait like a whole year or something for it to come out the other. And then the last part, I think they did in the fall. And man, we were glued to that TV. That was really exciting. Um, anyway, and so after that, I really was really excited, even more than ever, to do that. But life gets in the way. You got four kids, and you got things to do, and and then my husband graduated from chiropractic college, and then we moved to Dubuque, and then I started doing musical theater at Five Flags and different places, and I just love that. I felt like I was doing what I was meant to do when I was singing and dancing. It was like what I always wanted to do. I love musicals. And I did one that was the sesquicentennial of Dubuque. I guess there were two of them, as Paul Hemmer was saying. He did the other one. And but there were two of them. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. And I was fine with the singing part, and the dancing I was learning because I wasn't very good at dancing. But I had teachers there, but I didn't feel comfortable at all with acting. And I thought, I don't know anything about it, and I had no self-confidence. And this is a reason why I went on this journey. I just didn't have any self-confidence. And things weren't always so good at home, and there was some violence, and we got strapped a lot. And so I just had no self-confidence, but I knew I wanted to. In my head, I thought about it, but I was just so fearful. And when I got up to sing a solo at church, the first time I did, I think I was 23, and my legs were shaking so bad, I thought I was going to fall down on the floor. And I had to hold the chair, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I see other people get up and they sing. Yeah, they make mistakes and they're nervous, but I can tell they're not going through what I'm going through, because I'm literally having a panic attack, and I'm just so stressed out and fearful of everything. And I I just didn't want to live my life that way. And I thought I had to get over this. And I remember once we went to a Catholic school. In fact, we just had a reunion. It was really great. And our eighth grade class reunion for our elementary school, it was great. And we did this one thing where we went to a special religious service after school every day, and the teacher told us to go down and buy a Bible, and she wanted us to start reading more. And I opened the Bible up, and there was a drawing in the front. I call it a drawing, and it was a picture of Jesus, and he was sitting on a rock, and the children were sitting all around him. He had a baby on his lap, and there were children standing behind him and others all around him. And of course, it's the scripture that Jesus loved the little children. And I thought to myself that Jesus loves me. And no matter what bad thing happens here in my home, I know that he loves me. And that if he were here, he wouldn't do that to me. And so that's how I got through it. And that's the foundation of everything I do in life. If I'm sharing my talents, it's my faith in Christ. And so anyway, I moved forward, and then we ended up moving to California. So the first thing I did out there was sign up immediately the first week that I arrived, and I signed up for Tepper Gallegos, and you guys will all know him from our time period. That the Fruit of the Loom underwear commercials. The apple and the grapes were Tepper and Gallegos. So they had their own workshop about commercials. And so I took that. And pretty much what I learned is I don't want to do commercials. I mean, I don't like selling other people's stuff. It's just not me. If it's something I believe in, I can sell something, but I couldn't do that. I'm just not interested in investing myself in that. And, but an interesting experience happened, because in the first week, and nobody could believe it in Hollywood. They go, how are you? How long have you been doing this? Well, I just got here 3 days ago from Iowa. And they're like, what? 3 days ago you got here? And yeah, I just came right in. I don't waste time. So anyway, I got the trade paper, and they were having this cattle call. And so you go on down on Wilshire Boulevard, and there's a giant fancy hotel down there. And you go down there, and first you go in the lobby, and I got there super early because I'm very scared about finding parking in LA. It's terrifying. It really is. If you could see it, there's like 20 signs on every post about don't park here on Tuesday. You can do this, you can't do that. And with just one sign after another, I can't possibly read all that. You practically get into an accident reading the signs. So anyway, I got there really early. I was the first one there. And then now I showed up, 3 days to 5 days from Iowa. And I had on my modest little gray and white striped dress, very modest, with a little bow at the neck. And I had my 2-inch heels on, hardly any makeup. I was never a makeup person. And so I was just sitting there, Miss All American Iowa, sitting there. And these people began coming in. And the first thing you learn is that no one speaks to you, and don't speak to anyone. Well, I'm not like that. All these people started coming. And I go, oh, is it? It's really hard coming here, blah, blah, nice day. Just start making chat to talk to people. And they just look at you, and they stare at you with this hate, like, don't talk to me. And so you learn you don't talk to anybody when you're coming to an acting thing. So that was my first painful lesson. But oh, I'm telling you, the people that came in there, it just got more and more bizarre, and no one was friendly, and they're all just staring at each other, and they look you up and down because they're thinking, oh, she's not going to win, I'm going to get it, you know what I mean? And so then this lady came in, and she had a cat suit on, and it was a leopard cat suit with like 6-inch heels, And she put her makeup on with a trowel and oh my gosh, the big hair. And I thought, oh my gosh, I finally said, you know what? I'm going to go home. I don't belong here. This just isn't me. And I just wrestled with myself. And I said, no, I showed up here. I'm just going to stay. I'm going to see this thing through. And anyway, it wasn't a friendly experience. Finally, they let us go up on the attic of this hotel, up on the roof. And I thought, wow, this is really bizarre. And there were a lot of people. And so, anyway, we snaked around up on the top of this roof, and I have no idea what's going on. I just walked out of Iowa. I don't know. And anyway, you snake around, you snake around. It's like being on a ride for Disneyland or something. And then finally you get to this table, and there were all these Japanese men sitting there. And I thought, geez, what are they doing up here, just sitting on the roof at the table? I had no idea those are the people we were auditioning for. And so it's a cattle call. So you essentially just walk by the table and they have all your headshots in order. So anyway, I'm walking by the table and they had my picture. I was like, oh, yeah. And they started passing my picture around. I got very, very excited. And I thought, oh, geez, what's going on with them? I had no idea it had anything to do with me. Anyway, the next day I woke up and they phoned me and said, congratulations, you got the part. And I'm like, what? And she said, there were 2,000 people there and you were the only person that got it. And I was, you know, on this journey, I have these messages that come to me, and I almost went home so many times, but I forced myself to stay. And what a great lesson that was. And um, so that happened. And eventually I got in with an acting group in Orange County. And it was really a good school in that we had a 3 camera setup. And we would go in there and read a script and act for the camera, and just like as if you were on TV. And then you would go to on the second day of the week, we would do cold reading. So we would practice walking in. We'd have a group of people there. You pick up your resume, and then you pick up, practice talking to producers at studios. And so you make an entrance, and you got to practice all that. And I actually did pretty good at that, but it involved a lot of lying. It's kind of strange, but it's a strange business that way. It's like people have to lie. Oh, I just did this last week, because you're not going to get a job unless, like, oh yeah, I was on this last week, and it's like, oh, okay, you're working, you're going. If you go in and say, yeah, well, I did something last year. Oh boy, yeah, you're dead meat. So it's weird. You had to learn to kind of lie and just go. And eventually, I just had to go. Okay, it's not that kind of a lie. Just roll with it. And it was really hard. But then we got to watch back the work that we filmed on the Monday. And it was another interesting point in my life. And I couldn't stand looking at myself. I thought I was ugly and I was fat, and I couldn't, it was just painful to look at myself on this camera. And I felt very uncomfortable because I knew I wasn't good at this at all. And, but it was interesting. I would look at the people around me, and they were in awe of themselves just being on this camera and on this TV screen. And and I thought that's really strange. I'm just horrible, and it seemed like they were horrible on the opposite. They could see no wrong. They thought they were just great, like they were going to be working on a film next week or something. Anyway, but as time went on, I was there for like a year. I would start to watch my work, and I thought, just pretend you're somebody else. And that's how I did it. So I just look at myself. I didn't think about it, that it was me. And I thought, well, what would I think if I saw this person? But then I started to realize that there would be like 7 seconds there. And I went, that was real. I wasn't thinking about myself. I just gave that line, and I believed that myself. And so I thought, oh my gosh, there really is hope for me. I might be able to learn how to act. And so I thought, well, my goal is now to make that 7 seconds, 15 seconds. And so I just kept working and working at it. And, I got to a certain place, but then I felt like I hit a kind of a ceiling, and I left that group. But I did get on 3 TV shows, and one of the things I got on of note that was very interesting, it would be a little bit interesting to other people, was I got on Golden Girls, and it was very interesting watching them work. They're so professional, and they're at the top of their game. And so they had this young director, and no matter what they said, he just say, "Oh, that's great." Like they go to break and they come back and they go, "We didn't like the joke that the writer wrote. We're changing all of that, and we don't like this either. We don't get it." So we wrote the whole thing, and the director's like, "Oh, great, great," Like I'm like, "Okay, you never see that." And it was a beach scene, and it was where what's her name, the old lady, and she got married, and it was a two-part thing. And so we were at this beach scene because they were having a pizza parlor. They were opening a pizza parlor thing at the beach. So anyway, these poor girls that were extras there, thank heavens, I was the only person they picked to walk on the deck coming out into the beach. So these other poor girls had to wear swimming suits, and they had to be running through the scene, and they'd spray them all down. Now the studios, they're like 40 degrees in there. It's freezing. And and then you get all sprayed down and you're sopping wet. And then they would stop filming that. And then they just have to stand there waiting to come back until we got back to it again. And it was very interesting. And Betty White stopped and she looked at the director and she said, "Those girls over there have blue lips. And I want you to stop this right now. Go and get them blankets because I am not going to work here knowing those poor girls are freezing over there." And trust me, they never do that on a set. And so I was very impressed with her. And then we broke for lunch, and we came out to an outer area, and all of us extras were out there, and we kind of made a circle, and we were talking about, what this was like. It was just so weird to think, wow, what we were doing, and the three women, not Betty White, but the other three women came out, and I'll just put it this way: they truly seemed like miserable, unhappy people. They were not nice, and that's all I'll say about it. But I was shocked because when they're on the set, they look like they'd be a ball, but oh man, when you're off the set, it just shows you. And anyway, then we gathered in a circle and we were talking and we were thinking like, wow, did you see that? That was really negative. We didn't expect that at all. And then we were finished talking and I turned around and I almost stepped on Betty White's foot. She came over to say hi to us. And oh my gosh, she's so kind. She is no phony. She is very kind and thoughtful to everybody. And she came up and said, "Well, what do you think? Do you enjoy being on the set? Is this a good experience for you?" And oh, I my God, it was just unbelievable. And she just sat there and talked to us for, like 5 minutes. And then she said, "Well, we got to go to lunch." And then she laughed. But I just can say that I think she's a wonderful person. And she's not phony in any way. And so, you learn a lot from these experiences. You think, you maybe your life is a little bit boring. You're taking care of kids all the time, but some of these people have all the money in the world, all the fame, but they're not very happy people. And so no matter where I went, I always felt like I was learning an important lesson. I felt like I was where God wanted me somehow, that I was learning valuable lessons about life. And after we did Golden Girls, I took, well, it was interesting because there were casting directors who would come and we'd go into Burbank and read for them. And that was fun. I mean, one time I read for A League of Their Own. And the casting director came in. She said, "Oh, we just booked Madonna today." And she said, "We got to cast all these extra parts." And so anyway, we were all really excited. And anyway, but I read that part, and it was very interesting, though, that as time went on, I realized that a lot of these casting directors weren't really good at their job, and I stopped going to see them. I was always in awe of them before and afraid of them. And I was trying to overcome my fear. That was my big deal with my whole life in this journey. I was trying to overcome my fear. And I realized I'd really made a turn when I realized some of these casting directors are not good at their job. And I know they're not good at their job because when you see good ones, you understand. Like I had a really good one come on, and she gave us a part and we read it. And then she said, "That was pretty good. How about playing it like this and X and Y?" And I said, "Oh, okay." And so then you do that. And they go, "Great. You take direction very well. And I know that I would put you on my list for possibly hiring." And at that moment, I realized, yeah, she's really good at her job. And I just started crossing these names off the list. I stopped going to all of them. Anyway, but some of the casting directors came in, and one of them said, you know what you want to do? If you want to write, you're going about this all wrong. If you want to get into this industry, I mean, how many of you are going to get hired from here? Well, not very many of you. And he said, you're going about it all wrong. What you need to do is write something, create the project, find others, and be collaborative, get together and make this project. And that's how you break into the industry in this town. And oh wow, that was really what I wanted to hear. But I did have, so I really got good tips from some casting directors. And there was a lady in our group, and she was so nice. And she was in her 80s, and she started to get very frail, and she was eventually walking with a cane. And we would get put together a lot of times as a mother and daughter. And one day we did our part, and we were walking off the stage, and she said, "You know what? We must look really good together because they're always this casting director's always putting us together as a mother and a daughter." And I said, "No, you're right. That's really sweet of you. Thank you." And um, and she was a person who had famous children. And one day I came in, and I was going through a divorce, and it was really, really hard on me. And I decided I was going to keep doing these readings because it's the only time, a little bit of time all week that I got away from the kids. And I just had to do something just for me. So I went in, and I was sitting in the back of the room, and the lady came up to me, and she said her name was Jean, and she said, I I know there's something wrong. What's going on? And I said, "Oh, I'm going through this divorce." And she goes, "Oh, no, oh, no." She said, "Well, when this class is over, I want you to walk me to my car, and I want you to tell me all about it." And so I said, "Okay, fine." So we were walking along the street on Burbank, and I was telling her what was happening. And she said, "Oh my gosh, that happened to my very best friend. And that guy, she never married again. She's been single her entire life." I thought, "Oh my gosh, I hope that doesn't happen to me." And which it did. And anyway, I was completely blown away with her kindness. And as she was talking, I got a little distracted, and I was looking out. It was dark outside. It was summer, and it was dark, and we were walking under the street lights. And I thought, this is so bizarre. When I was a kid, if somebody could have told me when I was sitting there watching Andy Mayberry that someday I'm going to be walking down a street in Burbank, and I'm going to be talking to Ron Howard's mother, and I'm going to be telling her about my divorce, and she's going to tell me these stories about her friend. This is just so bizarre. I can't believe this is my life. How did I get here? This is just bizarre. I never would have predicted it for myself, but I just kept moving along and progressing. And, a lot of people say negative things about Hollywood, and there's a lot to that, but there's some nice people there too, some really good people. And anyway, I just always try to support people that are doing good things or making good movies and go on out supporting them because that's how they get financing. If people don't go, they're not going to get financing to make more good movies. So um, anyway, I just thought it was it was a it was a good experience. And when I was in that first acting group where they had the cameras, I forgot, I didn't tell you, but when I first watched myself back on the first time, I looked at myself and I realized, is that what I look like? I didn't realize that I was always looking down and that I had a skull on my face. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's no wonder people go by, adults would always come by me and they go, "Smile, smile," like that's going to make you smile, "Oh, smile." Like, "Oh, good, thanks." I had no concept that that's what I look like. And I thought, oh, geez, no, it's no wonder I'm not going to get anywhere like that. But I know it had to do with my childhood, and I just have to work on it. And during the divorce, I went to counseling, and that really helped me. And it's very interesting, but going to counseling was like the best therapy I ever had. And I would tell the counseling what my childhood was like. And they said, "Well, you just spent your whole life just trying to keep from being annihilated." And he said, "You've got to kill those voices, these people that they're in your head and they're saying negative things to you, and you're going to have to crush them. Otherwise, they're going to ruin your life, and you got to stop the messages." And so every time I prepared a script before we did a reading, I ran in the bathroom and I looked at the mirror at myself, and And I would do the whole script and I would tell myself, I'm fine. And I'd pretend those people were there. I said, you have no power over me. No more. I'm not going to do this with you. I don't, just shut up. You're not in my head. I'm going to walk out there and do it. I can do a good job. And you know what? I broke through that ceiling. And then I just started getting much better. And I never thought I was going to do that. I really didn't. But I felt like I said, like I was on a journey that I was supposed to be on. And I was really glad for that. I was really glad for that because I was getting lots of experience and I was becoming a happier person to unload that stuff off my shoulders. And anyway, I got a divorce. So, but oh, I was going to tell you one of the things was one of the casting directors came in. He told us to go to the American Film Institute, and I thought, oh, okay. Well, the next day I'm phoning him. I'm checking that place out. And he said, you'll get a lot of credibility if you go over there, get connected over there. So after that, for the next 2 or 3 years, I took every single class there was at the American Film Institute. I took guerrilla filmmaking, storyboarding, every class there was. And we got to meet a whole lot of directors. And that time it was the 90s, the mid 90s. And that was the short little period where they had independent films. And the little guy finally got a chance to make films. And they were low budget. And I was very excited about that. And so I got to meet a lot of interesting people. I saw Kevin Costner, and he's a really nice person. And there's a lot of really good people that I met there. Um, I went when you're in the screen because I got in the Screen Actors Guild. So when you're there, you get invited to stuff. And so when they're having opening screenings, especially for the award shows, they put up all these shows and then they invite everybody in the Screen Actors Guild to come. And there's about like 150 people show up for any given show. And I came on because Katherine Heigl had a new show at that time. And it was interesting. And there's only like 100 people there. And I was sitting next to this girl, and she was really, really nice. And we were having a good visit. And then there was a break, and I thought, I got to get out and go to the restroom. And so the hallway was very, very crowded. It was a big intersection. And so I was kind of running as fast as I could to this group, not literally running, but walking very fast. Anyway, I didn't know, but Katherine Heigl was doing the same thing from another direction, and it was a blind corner. And then we ran into each other. We just literally ran into each other. And you know what? Most people in Hollywood would just look at you and you go, you idiot. They just find fault with you. And she looked at me and her immediate reaction, she grabbed my arms and she said, are you okay? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I just hope you're okay. I said, no, I hope you're okay. And it was just funny. And I just seemed to spend my entire time walking into people, nearly stepping on their feet. It was pretty funny. So anyway, I went back in to the room and the show still hadn't started. And the girl next to me said, what do you think about Katherine Heigl? And she said, and I said, oh, I just had an experience with her. I said, I just walked into her and her first thought was me. She didn't think about herself at all. And you don't do that unless that's who you are. You're a caring person. You care about other people. And I think the world of her now, and I would support her in anything. And she said, really, you're the first person that said that. I am her makeup artist. And people say the most ugliest things about her, and I don't understand it because I know her and she's a lovely person. And so you just run into this stuff, but everywhere there's always good people. And so then I went over to the American Film Institute. I took screenwriting classes. I thought, finally, I'm going to get to the writing a story about my ancestors. But I got to tell you, I bought the program. I went to the Austin Film Festival. And it's a screenwriting festival. And I did a million things. I was following the industry, but I even got the screenwriting program. And I'm sitting there and just looking at that page, I just started having a panic attack. And I thought, I can't do this. Why did I think I could do this? No, I know I can do it. I have a great story, but I had no confidence in myself. And so it's weird that I was getting better at acting, but starting over in some other field is just like starting literally all over. And it was so frustrating. And I thought, oh man, man, man. So then something interesting happened. I always like to teach my kids to be givers and do things in the community. And I had this article in the newspaper, and it said that they were decorating this Victorian house, and it was a female doctor was there, and the historical society was housed in that building. And so he said, we need volunteers to come down and decorate the house. Well, I love Victorian. You didn't have to tell us twice. My two of my daughters are costume designers and they make Victorian clothes. And so anyway, we went down there and we were decorating the house and it all went great. And then I came back the next year, we did it again. And the next thing you know, I was on the board. And on the board, they were tired. They were doing these projects with progressive dinners. And they said, oh my gosh, this is just a torturous way to earn money, you know? And somebody said, I think we should do a cemetery event and do something at the cemetery. And they said they do that in Hollywood and with all the movie stars and stuff. And I don't know, it was called a New Orleans thing. I know nothing about that. I didn't then. And I didn't know what they were doing. But immediately when they said that, I just thought, was that made for me or what? I spent half my life in cemeteries looking for people, looking for my ancestors. And so, and then I had my writing ability, and then all these things started coming together. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, I can do it. I know how to do it. And so they go, well, we don't know what we're going to do. I said, no, I know what we'll do. I know how to do it. I'll go and I'll start working on it. Give it to me. And so I went to the cemetery and then I started finding a pathway through the cemetery. And then I had to find the people to talk about. And then we just went in small groups of like 20 people at a time. And there would be people standing at their graves telling their life story. And I just kept getting lots of good people. And we got antique fire engines and we did a scene with them and a horse and carriage. And then I got a stagecoach. And one year we reenacted how to start a town. And I really never knew that. And then once I realized it, I thought, this is really interesting. So the way a town starts is you buy some property and then you say, I want to turn this into a town, but you can't turn it into a town unless the mail is delivered there. So if you're in the middle of nowhere, now you've either got to get the train in there or you got to get a contract with the stagecoach because that's what stagecoaches existed for, was to send the mail. That's what they were there for. They just put passengers on to give them some more income. And so anyway, and so then you just go apply and I'm gonna start Spurgeonville. And once the federal government sees that you've secured a mail site, then you get authorized, and that's how a town is born. Now, one of the reasons this is very interesting to me is that of late, because I found out that my ancestors, now because of the computer and everything, they actually came and were the founders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. That's what the Boardmans did, and some other lines. And so they're really chosen by the king to come over here and start a town. So they get a grist mill, lay out streets, they do all those basic things to start a town. And then they would just move on, an hour or two away, and they found a new town. And that's what they did. And then they go to other states. And so my Boardman ancestors were the founders of Wethersfield, Connecticut. And this was newer stuff that I have found out more recently. And so I thought it was funny that here my ancestors were doing that. And now I was learning how a town was built. And I really saw how it all went together and the history of the country, how, well, it was so important. These people that were just brave and went out in the middle of nowhere and just started a town. A lot of them did it because their fathers did it. And so they already had experience at doing that. And it was really interesting. And so anyway, so I was writing all those scripts and it was a match made in heaven for me. And I thought, this is great. And that is when I found my voice because I knew this was me. This is history and it's genealogy and you're entertaining people and it's acting. And so I had to do all the casting and everything. And it was a lot of fun. I actually did 6 of those. And I learned a lot. And my daughters and my sister were in them. And we had a lot of fun, and they got to wear a lot of Victorian costumes. And so you see some of you people, you see them because I put some of those pictures up once in a while, and that's what they're from. And so that was kind of the start of it. And then I had to sit down again and come back to that computer and start writing something. And I thought, I gotta face this fear that I have. And it wasn't easy. And while I was starting that, the cemetery district called me and they said, you know what, we want you to write a book about the people buried in our cemetery. And so I'd already done all the research. So all I had to do was figure out a route and put it together. But I'm telling you, it was to sit down and start doing that was just torture. I was so tortured that I knew I could do it, but as soon as I sat down, I thought, no, I just started having a panic attack. And I thought, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. But I wrote that book. It was 100 pages long, and it took me 2 years to do it, which is ridiculous. And everybody'd say, oh, didn't you get that book done yet? I mean, you had all the research done. But that's how crippled I was with my fear. And so then I thought, well, I've just got to get this done. And that pretty much brings me up to how I got started in this journey, this last leg of my journey. And I thought I'm going to I found this oh, I had met the screenwriter and she told me, Patty, why aren't you just writing the book? Because you're going to make a lot more money if you write the book and then write the screenplay. And I said, oh my gosh, there's no way. That's too, what happened to learn another craft? I mean, I thought, oh no, that's just too much. I don't think I can do it. But I kept the door open, but I was just like, oh no, that just seems too overwhelming. And so I kept going on with the screenwriting thing. But eventually I thought what I do is I buy a lot of screenplays. They started publishing them a lot, especially if you're around Hollywood. There's a lot of them around here. And so one of my teachers told me only read the best screenplays. Don't waste your time on anything else. Read the very best screenplays and analyze them. And so that's what I was doing. And I would go into libraries in Hollywood and stuff like that, the film libraries, and and I really put a lot of effort into studying it. And then when my friend told me about this, that I should write the book first, I thought, I'm sure she's right. She's giving me good advice, but I was so resistant. I thought, I've got to start picking up books. And so I read the screenplay, but then I would look at the book that it was adapted from, and I try to analyze it to figure out how to turn that story into a screenplay. And that's kind of where I was for a long time. And and then I thought I got to well, I started doing another research thing. I had a friend who played Father Sarah, and I got involved in California history. And I thought, oh, I'm never going to be interested in this. It's a Spanish. I'm not interested in that. This is how my whole life is. And I thought, I'm not interested in that. It just seems too overwhelming. But my friend played Father Sarah, and he kept taking me to these different missions. And I grew to really appreciate them. And I started reading all about the history of it. And like, famous mountain men came to the St. Gabriel mission. I mean, all of a sudden, the whole thing came alive for me as history. And I started realizing how interesting it was. And I actually was just talking to a very interesting person. I can't think of his name, but he is an anthropologist. And I saw one of his podcasts on YouTube, and he was doing work on the Indians. And if I find it later, I'll put it up on my page. Put up his name, because if you're interested in that kind of thing, you will love this guy. He's so fascinating. And he was telling me the work he was doing with the Indians, and that he was collecting stories from the tribes themselves or in book print, any information that he could get about where they traveled from, like what direction. So he was trying to figure out how they all got where they are, because there's similarities in language. And so we know that at one time this group is together and then they changed, they moved somewhere else. And he's trying to figure out how that all worked. And oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. I just love it. I had written a screenplay about the Black Hawk War. And I thought, oh man, I want to make this a three-part thing about the history of the upper Mississippi River Valley, because nobody does that. Oh, there's the Hiawatha, but other than that, they just skipped over that history. And then they go directly to the West. And he goes, I know. This anthropologist is saying, remember when we were kids, we grew up, they talk about the pilgrims, you talk about the colonies, and then you kind of get out to the west to maybe the Mississippi River, and then you jump to the west, and they never talk about California. They talk about Oregon, never talk about California or the Indians there. And I said, it's so funny because I have done a lot of research on the Indians. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah. And so I started giving him information that I knew. And because the Indians that are right near here, I knew the chief and his son. They do living history stuff with me, and I found out that their language was originally Shoshone, so that's a Plains Indian. And I thought, that's curious. How did they get here? Because the other Indians, like in Santa Barbara or San Diego, they're not Shoshone. So I thought, this is really a complex puzzle piece. And then you realize there's a desert there. So that was a boundary for a long time. So he was telling me, the anthropologist, he said, yeah, I pretty much figured out how they came down from the north part above the desert, and they were kind of in Northern California, and putting these pieces together. And I don't know, I just love this stuff. It's so fascinating. Like, I was reading all kinds of books, and they were saying how they felt like some of the Indians in California have Chinese heritage because the Chinese would go out in those boats that were made out of like wicker or something. They're just like straw, or not straw, but they're wicker, but they bind it all together, just like what do they call it? Thatchery, in Europe. And so, but they built big boats with those, and then they would go out fishing. But there's a current, a black current that picks them up and it takes them out. And they never saw those people again. And there's these writings in China. They, one day they disappeared and they never came back. And we don't know what happened to them, So it's left to everybody's imagination. But some of the earlier explorers in the 1400s came here, and they said they saw boats like that on the California coast. So we know that these Chinese, and there weren't any Chinese there, so they'd blended in with the Indians. So it's just fascinating, and I love that's part of the genealogy, it's part of the history part. I just like to figure out how did that happen. So that guy was really interesting. He actually, I don't know if you guys have been to, and I would like to go to, but that Museum of the Bible, and they have that big ark, and so he's working for those people. And what they want to do is put up, he was telling me, I said, what's going to be the end result of this? And they go, well, they're going to create a museum just about the Indians. And once I really kind of get this really tied together, but I've got some very strong information, but I was able to give them some stuff. And when I was doing the research on the Black Hawk War, a couple of Keokuk, Chief Keokuk, he went out west. And so before the Black Hawk War started, the Americans were taking them out, the Indian agents and stuff would try to get them out east so they could see our armies, our army posts, they could see what we were all about. And a lot of them came, and Keokuk did. And it was a real culture shock for them, and they were really blown away by, almost literally, by the forts we had and the armament. And they realized, wow, we're not going to be able to win against these people. But an interesting comment was made. And so Keokuk said, I always wanted to see the land where my fathers were, because they were Algonquin, and they were on the coast, and before they got all the way to Iowa. And that really stuck to me. I just thought, that is weird. How did they get there? How did that happen? And so this guy was working on it. It was just so funny. And so I was able to tell him what Keokuk said, and he goes, I'd never heard that before. But he said I had discovered that they came down north and into Iowa and these places. So anyway, it was just fun. And it's going to be very interesting when it comes out. But this guy has many podcasts. And so as he's doing his research, he puts it up there. So if any of you are interested, I will look his name up and then, put that up on my author page so that you can look for it there. I apologize, my author page isn't much, but when you publish your first book, there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm trying to do something in every area, newspapers or radio, and everything I can, and bookstores, libraries, and there's an endless amount of what you can do. And so I don't have a lot of money, so I just don't have money to pay people to do everything. So I got to figure it out myself. So when you go to my webpage, there's not a lot there, but it's going to keep building, and I'm going to start getting things up there. And then I'll find my audience, and the people are interested in the things that I'm interested in too. So anyway, all my books are going to be somehow about genealogy and history, about looking at your life and seeing the importance of your life, because that's my journey and I believe in that. I know we are each other's angels. It's happened to me so many times, and I've met them all along in my journey. And so, anyway, yes, I was talking to this anthropologist. And so we had a good talk about that. And because of my friend had portrayed Father Sarah, and I went to all the missions and stuff, I learned a lot about California, and I learned new things that I'd never considered before. And that is that the California played a part in the American Revolution. Now I thought, what? How can that be? I mean, it's just so far away, and we don't learn any of that. We have a much more diverse history as a country that we don't know anything about. And that's the story I want to tell. So anyway, Father Sarah, I'll just give you the basic connection because I think it's fascinating. And so this is going to be one of my future projects. But Spain really helped us in the American Revolution. They were already giving us gunpowder and everything before the revolution even started. They were doing this because they had a bank. France does not have a bank. England, major banks. They have the largest army in the world, the largest fleets, the most well-trained people. And so the odds of us winning against them, of course, we all know, was very minimal, except they didn't understand anything about America. And they were just using old style battling, and they did in Europe. And it's not how we operate here. The Indians don't operate that way. And so anyway, it was just really interesting about how this all unfolded. And I had no idea what a significant part Spain played in the American Revolution. And we could not have won that war without them. We couldn't have won it without France, but France was different because they didn't have a bank. They just had wealthy people. So we were getting wealthy people to help with the war, and mostly to get things to us, like gunpowder, because gunpowder that we make in North America is no good. It all comes like from the Middle East and Europe, Eastern Europe. That's where all the materials for it are. And so you have to create a chain. If you're going to go into war, you got to have materials. And so Spain really helped with all that. And there's a particular couple of people that really, really helped. And one was Jose de Galvez. He was the viceroy of New Spain. And he had a fascinating story himself. I won't tell that now, but he was an orphan. And then he rose to be the king's right-hand man. And then he made him the viceroy of Spain. And he was a very good man. And he really followed the Christian faith. And he really always looked out for the poor because he grew up poor with nothing. And the whole family was like that. And he had 4 brothers. And one of his brothers became a naval person, naval commander. And his name was Miguel. And then Miguel's son was Bernardo. And Bernardo became the governor general of New Orleans. And that is the point of how Spain helped us in the war, because they controlled the Mississippi River. And so Britain had the east side, Spain had the west side. So they were providing us with guns, uniforms, gunpowder. They were bringing it up the Mississippi River, up to the Ohio, and even up to the winter quarters. And it's just the name escapes me right at the second. But we all know it. It's where they almost starved to death. It was the crux of the war. It'll come to me anyway, but you know what I'm talking about. It was in Pennsylvania, and but those goods never made it. And I found out why they didn't make it. I called several people at Valley Forge. That's what it is. I called several people who were the experts of the war in Valley Forge, and I bought their books, and They knew nothing about this, nothing. And I realized, oh man, I've actually found something really original. So what happened is the Spanish were supposed to send all this stuff up through Bernardo de Galvez, and a lot of times he paid for it in advance, and then we had to pay him back because we didn't have the money. And but the British seized it at the opening of the Ohio River, and so they seized some of the boats, so they never got to Valley Forge. And the rest of the boats went across the river. They went to St. Louis, and they stored all the stuff. They put all the stuff in storage because they couldn't get it up the Ohio. So anyway, that's something new that, as far as I can tell, no one knows. So anyway, it's a fascinating story about how they helped us win the war. And Father Sarah in California was offering prayers at the Monterey Mission. The Indians were donating grain, the soldiers here, and Father Sarah himself gave all the money that he was given to by the king to pay for the missions. He never spent it. He built them all of adobe and mud. And so he gave all that money that was in Mexico City, that was given to him to build the missions, was given to the cause for the American Revolution to help America. And nobody knows his story, and very few people anyway. And so that's something I'm really excited to work on. So that's what my mind was keen on. And I thought, oh, I'm ready now. I'm going to get this done because this is going to be awesome. And our country really needs this right now. And so I decided I wanted to go online and read more books though. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite stories was the Christmas box. And I really didn't know anything about Richard, but it was always one of my favorite stories. It was a Hallmark Hall of Fame when that really meant something. There was no Hallmark Channel. And anyway, it was very interesting. And it had Maureen O'Hara and Richard Thomas from John Boy from the Waltons was in it. And it was a very, very good story. And I thought, you know what? That's one of my favorite stories. I'm going to go and order that online. So it was another project to analyze from book to screen. And so I went on, I just bought it used because I don't have much money. And so I went on there and I bought the book used. And then there was a button up there and it said, follow Richard Paul Evans. And I thought, yeah, why not? I need to learn more about this. What's their journey about? And so I clicked on his button and then this class came up on it's called Stage 32. And there was a screenwriter coming on there. And I thought, no, I'm going to take this class because he won an Academy Award. And his last name was Atchison. And he wrote Aquila and the Bee. And I don't know how many of you saw that, but it's an amazing movie. It had Lawrence Fishburne in it. And it was about a poor Black girl that had no opportunity. And she got involved in a spelling bee and won in the end. And it was just a beautiful triumph of the human spirit story. And anyway, and I thought, oh man, I love that movie. And so I thought I want to take his class. And so I did. And he said, you do what I do, and you're gonna be winning these award shows. And I never got anywhere. I entered a lot of screenwriting contests, but I never got past the first reading. And so I knew there was things. I know I have the history down, but I wasn't doing it quite right. But I understand it now. And so anyway, I took this class from him and I was ready to sit down, write the story about Spain and the American Revolution. And then all of a sudden, I got this message from Rick. And he said, from Richard's class, he said, I'm just starting a new program called Author Ready, and I'm going to teach people all about self-publishing. And I thought, oh, wow. Man, no, I really got to write this screenplay. I can't do this now. I can't start something else. And then I thought, well, it was only like $15 a month. And I thought, geez, well, I can afford that. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to start it. I'll start it. I'll see if I can do both at the same time. But I got on, and Richard has a wonderful program. And he's known as the king of self-publishing. And of course, when he wrote the Christmas box in the 90s, it was a completely different industry. But I followed the program, and they started we have weekly meetings, and we start reading our work every week, sharing them, and then listening to other people's work. And within a few weeks, I was completely hooked. I was a little bit scared, but I'm used to performing, so it was like, it's okay. But I had to write stuff, and that was the scary part. And so I wrote the first couple things and that was it. I was hooked. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to write a chapter every single week. I was so excited to get my book done. And in 10 months later, I had a book. And all I can tell you is I always feel like God blesses me somehow. And I meet these people. And Richard is just a wonderful person. I got to go to his first retreat. It's up in Utah. He has a big ranch next to Zion National Park, and it's so beautiful there. And anyway, I got to go, and I scraped enough money together to go. And Richard said to us, you know, my whole goal in doing this, there's just so much evil in the world, and I want to put together a group of people that are going to put good work in the world, and that's what this is about. And I thought, well, that's me. That's been my goal my whole life. I want to be with people to help make the world a better place. And so I knew that I was in a home where I belonged. And I'm really grateful to him. And while we were there at this retreat, at the end of the retreat, he came out with a couple copies of his new book. They were manuscripts for the Christmas memory, and it was going to come out, last year. And so he said, would anybody like to read my book? And so there were just two of them. I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And so I got a copy of it and I read it. And then he asked our opinion, what we liked about it, and, how it affected us. And he was so nice. And after the class was over, we were about to go home, and he put the manuscript into a leather binder. And he came up to me and he said, would you like to have my manuscript? And I said, oh my gosh, yes. And he said, I got to autograph it first. And then he wrote on it and he gave it to me, and I opened it up, and it said, for my gratitude for your friendship. And I can't remember, it was something like that, but for your friendship, and yeah, for our friendship, and for something else anyway. But I was just blown away because he said I was his friend. And he looked me right in the eye when he handed it to me. And I'll never forget it. And I opened it up and I read it. He said, thanks for being my friend. And I was on cloud nine. And I would say, for any bad thing that happened to me when I was a kid, my journey took me to places where there were loving people all along. And that was just amazing to me, that somebody of his stature, he has 46 best-selling, New York Times best-selling books. And he said that I was his friend. And it's been an amazing journey. And still have to get back to the screenplay, but I'm going to work it in. I'll just tell you a little bit about my book, and then I think I'll be done. And if you have any questions, my book, when I decided to write it, I thought, what am I going to do? Of course, I was very scared, but I've been through a lot of things, and I'm used to being scared and just working through it. And I thought, I'm going to find out how many. Oh, I went to a workshop with Richard, and he said my Christmas box book was 15,000 words. I thought, 15,000 words. Wow, that's a lot of words. And I thought, well, okay, that's going to be my goal. I want to write a Christmas book because I always loved Christmas. And I thought, I'm just going to shoot for 15,000 words. And I'm going to see if I can write that much. It's a lot longer than a goofy Christmas newsletter or a letter to your goofy friends and anything funny. So it really intimidated me. But you know what? Every week I showed up and I started writing and writing. And next thing you know, I had a book. And my book ended up being 48,562 words. And I couldn't believe it, because when I passed that 15,000, I go, no, there's a lot more to this story. And this character has to do this, and this character needs to arrive at this point. And when I picked the subject, I thought, I always loved Christmas, and I love to collect lighted Christmas houses. I have a huge Victorian house collection. Most of them were Mervyn's, but then I got some into Department 56, but they're so expensive. And so I have some of those. But anyway, so the inside of my house is always decorated to the hilt. And so I enjoy them very, very much. And I love at the Christmas time to sit down and then just write under these lights, write down my concepts and what I want to create. And I just feel so good all over. It's there. And like I said, it's like this moment with Richard. Anything bad that happened in my childhood has now been replaced with these people and meeting this caliber of a person. And you know what's funny? Um, Richard was just talking to us the other night, and he said, "You won't believe what's happened, but now I'm talking to Jordan Peterson contacted me because he really admires what I'm doing." So you see, it's weird. It's kind of like that 6 degrees of separation. And you just want to keep doing good things. And so my story, when I picked it, I decided I wanted to pick a story that had genealogy in it because genealogy is the #1 hobby in the world. And there would be a lot of people interested in that kind of a story. And then the latest thing, of course, is DNA. And I I have never done an adoption, helped somebody through that. But with the DNA now, you've got more clues. And so I thought I always wanted to do that. It's just something I wanted to challenge myself to do that. And that meant I really had to get on that ancestry program and get used to using that. And it was a whole bunch of new stuff. But I just kept working at it and working at it. And my daughter picked it up, April, and she loved it. And so she really got the computer part down really good. And she's very good at triangulation. And in other words, finding their ancestors that you got through the DNA, and then you got to figure out what ancestors could have been your relatives. And so but it's a puzzle again, and I love puzzles. So anyway, I worked on that, and my daughter and we worked on to help my friend, and she had this situation. She said, "Oh, I just want to find him. I'm afraid she's going to die, and I'm never going to be able to tell her or see her, and that she'll be dead before I figure out who she is." So I said, "Can I do it?" And so she goes, "Well, yeah." So she gave me everything she had, and I started out, and like I said, it was very complex. And so I got my daughter working on it. It took us over a year to figure it out. Literally. It was a very, very difficult case. And so I watched that show, Long Lost Family. I don't know how many of you out there watch it. I can't see your hands, but I would ask normally, raise your hand. Have you seen that? So my book is really a kind of who do you think you are meets Long Lost Family. And that's what I envisioned. And the main character is going to make these Victorian houses, and there's going to be lots of nostalgia in the story for old things. And because I love old things, I've still got Christmas ornaments my parents put on the tree, and I like the new ones sometimes, but I always want those memories of being a child. You never want to lose that in your life, that those memories of being childlike and finding things magical. And I love that part of my life, and I always try to nurture it. And so I have a lot of things from when I was a kid. I still have my Christmas stocking, and I put it out each year, even though nothing ever goes in it. It makes me feel good, and I want to feel good. Um, so that was the journey. And I would say out of publishing a book, I mean, I had it 10 months later, and most people go like, "Wow, are you kidding me?" No, I really did. You just follow Richard's system, and you're having meetings every week, and then Richard comes on, and then he meets with you twice a week if you join the Gold Club program, which is it's not expensive at all. And he teaches you all these things and teaches you about writing. And then the second meeting is about marketing, because we would write our book, and he would say, we'd be at the meetings, he goes, "How many people here finished their first draft?" And we'd raise our hand, and he goes, "Oh, whew, hard, huh?" And he goes, "Yeah, well, now the real work's beginning." Because that's nothing. You think writing is hard? Just wait till you got to go through all the editing, and then you got to start marketing your book. That's way harder. So, um, I, content, content editing is the very hardest because, and I was lucky. My teacher Debbie was very, very patient. She's very good at this part. Richard taught her, and she's just so good at it. I was a screenwriter, so I have to actually do things in reverse. I'm used to thinking there's a picture up there, and I picture what's going to be there, and then I would create a scene. And Debbie would say, "Well, okay, where are you?" I don't even know where you're at. You didn't describe where you're at. Did the people from the former room come with you? Oh yeah, well in my mind it happened, but it didn't. I didn't write it. So it was a real challenge to work through that. And I'm sure it's going to be a challenge again now to work backwards again. But that was it was a very interesting process, and everybody says you just feel like you want to shoot yourself before you get through the end of that. It's like, is this ever going to end? And it's things like, corrections. Like in the beginning of the story, you had three siblings, and now you get to the end, you decided you're only going to have one, but you forgot to correct that. I mean, there's just all these things that can be wrong with your content. But once you get through that, it was just fun, really. It wasn't hard at all because it's just about you go through looking for punctuation and grammar, and you go through that kind of editing, and then you got to go through where there's actual formatting of the book. And it was an easy journey, and I connected with the most wonderful people because Richard finds people that only meet his standard and that don't take advantage of people financially. And so, I was able to get through it. And I think that another thing that I would like to just say about my book, for anybody who buys my book or has it, the artwork is critically important. I like to draw, and I think of everything on a whole scale. And for me, the picture of the book has to tell a story too. It's inviting you in. And so I picked a cover, and I got this wonderful artist from London that made my cover, and I just love her, and I wanted to make all my covers. And so I put the horse because there's a couple animal angels in my story, a dog and a horse. And the horse is going away from us towards the church because the center of all of our lives is our faith. And the horse has an empty sleigh because I want to take you to the journey to this ghost town called Elkport. And the center of every community in the old days was the church. And there's a dog there. It's kind of hard to see the dog. There's a little collie at the bottom of the stairs in front of the church. And so it's like the horse is meeting his friend, and the horse is going to be a guide in the story too. So, and I mean the dog is. And so anyway, all my artwork was very deliberate, and just want to make you aware of that. I'm very pleased with how the cover came out. Um, I think I'm just glad that I took this journey. I don't regret it at all. And I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to try it, or if you're just a reader. I would love it if you bought my book and could help me in my journey. And the biggest thing in writing isn't how much money you spend on the publicity, it's the word of mouth. It's always the word of mouth. And Richard says that it always is. When if you like something, that you tell your friends, and that's how things grow, and they start to pick up. So, and of course, leaving reviews. If you read the book, if you buy it off Amazon, please go back and make a review because I'm working very hard to get my publicity together, but I need my friends to go on and put a review. It doesn't have, it can be one line. It doesn't have to be any big deal. Just one line saying how you felt about reading it. And of course, only if it's good. And anyway, you need to get like 100 reviews just to get Amazon. Then they'll give you like little boosts and put you out there more in the publicity. And I think I've got like five, and two of them were just sauerkrauts that bought my book, and they gave me a 2-star review. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was devastating. Oh, jeez. That's really a crushing thing to have happen. Um, but otherwise, I just proceed on with the journey. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask me, feel free. I can't think of anything else I need to say. Um, okay.
I don't see anything in
Okay.
the
All
chat
right.
right now. We can give it another minute. I can ask you a question, and then
Sure.
it'll give
Sure.
everyone some time to put a question in there if they have one.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. What about writing, the writing process, is the most difficult for you?
You know what? It used to be sitting down because I was so afraid and overwhelmed, but I don't have panic attacks anymore. Now it's like my friend. I look forward to evening coming and it's quiet and I can sit down and I just excited about the next chapter. Because I've begun a habit because I'm in a group. You really need to be in a group to do this. You don't want to be alone. And that was my problem in screenwriting. I was always just alone. And so I don't really find it as difficult at all anymore. It's just a habit, and it's one that gives me a very good feeling. That, and like I said, the content editing, that was the hardest. Oh, getting through that and making all those corrections are, uh, yeah, it's really hard. But it ends eventually, and then you go through the other things, and to me, they're not difficult. But did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. One more. What was the most surprising thing you learned while writing Entering Christmasville?
It was something, it was about, because I had just found out like 2 years ago that my ancestors had gone to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And I just found this because of the computer and the things that I can find. And I just didn't have that information available to me. And then I did a couple other people, my girlfriends, I did their genealogy. And shockingly enough, we were all rubbing shoulders. And it occurred to me that all the genealogy I'd been doing, and then as I was writing a story, I wanted people to think on the overarching story is how we treat each other is so important because we're all related or we're friends. When you're in the colonies, everybody's intermarried. If you watch any of those root shows or anything, they'll pull up pictures. Oh, you're related to this other actor, and you think, how did that happen? But it's because it was a very small world. And the truth of the matter is, we think the world is very big, but it isn't. It's small. And we're all related. And if we could know that once upon a time in the 1600s, our ancestors were founding towns together, and that after all these years, we would run into each other again, it's truly amazing. And that's one of the things I say in my book. That was one of the things that just, and I guess the other thing would be about adoption and love. And when, when I was on the plane and I was uh, going to Dubuque to do some publicity. I came out and met you, and then I came home, and both ways I was telling them. It came up. They asked me about some things. I said, "Oh, I'm writing a book," and they said, "Oh my gosh!" And I told them it was about adoption, and I said I was adopted both ways. So they go, "I was adopted," and I found my father because of the DNA, and I went and met him, and basically I met him, and he goes, "Well, she was 27," and she said, "Well, great, you found me. I hate your mother. I want nothing to do with her. Nothing against you, but get lost." It was basically what she said. But she also had the address of his parents, and so she went to their door and she knocked on their door, and they answered, and she said, I'm sure you don't know who I am, but my name is whatever it was." And they go, "We know who you are. Come in our house. We know exactly who you are." And they put her arm around her. They walked her into the fireplace in the living room. And they said, "We've had that picture of you since you were given up for adoption. And we just hope we were going to get to see you again," because they were very elderly. And so Christmas is about love. It's about forgiveness because this baby boy Christ was going to show us the way. And that's how it all ties together. It's really about love and about caring about other people and following Christ's teachings and just being a good person. Even if you don't believe in Christ, just have faith in God and we'll go forward. The same applies. So that's what I would say.
Thank you for that. There are a couple questions in the chat. The
Okay.
first one is, how do you flesh out your characters' different personalities?
Oh, that's a good question. I will say, I figured it out. And it's funny because I named the characters for some people that I know. Like I named one Mickey, and that was my neighbor girl, Mickey Gregory. And I know her, I think her sister's on here, Mary Jane. And so I just kind of started there because my story was starting at home. And so to kind of create them, I wanted to give them names of people that I was just familiar with. And so I named them, and then there was a Mary Kay Vaughan in the neighborhood. I gave one of the characters Mary Kay, and that kind of helped me to warm up to these people. And Nettie came to me very easily. Um, uh, I have a book of names, and it's very old. My mother had it, and she has circled there the name she was going to name me and my siblings. And I always have a fond memory of that and looking at names, and then it has all the root names in it too. So it's a pretty cool little book. And so I always keep that. That's a handbook that I always keep. And so I flip through it looking for names. But then I'm open, you know. And when North came, he had a different name at first, but I realized no, he's North is Nettie's the main character, and Nettie and North is her grandson. And she meets him in the beginning, and she's helping him do his genealogy because it means a lot to him, and he asks her to. And so it's like, oh, sure, I'll do that for you. And I don't want to give away any of the book, but it's very sweet. And that he had a different name, but then I thought, no, you know what, North, what he is, he's true North, and he's going to lead Nettie to the person she really wanted to meet. And nobody knew, and I'm not going to give it away. And so he was a key. North was a key, but to me, I thought of him as a compass, and he was true North. And he was the best that Nettie was, the best of everybody in the family. And he was a hard worker and a good person, and he had faith in God. And so he was the true North. So that's how I came up with that. And it is very interesting how they just start kind of developing themselves. And every night I started looking forward to, oh, what's going to happen tonight? I don't know either. Now, I only got into like 3 chapters, and then I was like, okay, I got to figure out what's the ending because in screenwriting, you know that. And if you watch the OJ trial, you know that you have to know the ending. They didn't know the ending of the trial, and it just ended in a disaster. And so, whenever you're writing something or you're convincing somebody of something, you got to know where you're going. So, all points lead to the same place. And then in the end, all the questions should be answered. And so when I figured out that I wanted it to be about genealogy and adoption, then I figured out the ending. And then I was really pleased with that. So then it was kind of easy to go back because I knew after that where I was going with these characters. And I think the most interesting character or surprise character to me was Larry Lewis. And that's what his name was in the beginning, but I changed his name to Hank because Larry Lewis was, he was a divorced. He divorced from the family and due to alcohol and he was missing, just absent from the family pretty much. And so, but as this story developed, I realized that Larry was a really stand-up guy. And he just got off on the wrong track, but he righted himself early on and he was able to fix himself. And he was afraid to come back to his family. He was ashamed of what he did. And that's appropriate for a man. You're supposed to be the protector of your family, and he fell down on the job. But his daughter wants to reach out to him, and she does. And so that's all I'll say about that. But I realized that Larry, I started to love Larry because we're all broken. All of us are. And whether it was me in my childhood or whatever, or somebody gets, addicted to alcohol or whatever, but we can always stop and then we can always right ourselves and use our faith to get there, to believe that we can get there. And so that's what I think about the characters. And I just said, Larry, you deserve a better name. And it's funny because you start talking to him. You're just, and it was very funny because I had a roommate. I'd be in the kitchen and then all of a sudden I'd think of dialogue and I'd be, oh yeah, yeah, then we did that. And like some of the stuff in the car. And I was thinking about the songs. Then I started laughing my head off, thinking about these old songs from our childhood. And anyway, and my roommate said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah." I said, what were you just doing? You were talking to somebody. Oh, I was the characters. I was just, I was being the characters. And it got so that I'd be in the grocery store and I was doing it. I noticed people were looking at me like, oh my gosh, she must be a mental case. Anyway, but it's funny. You start to love them and they live in you. And they just come up anyway. You're walking through the store and then you think of something and then you start running the dialogue in your mind. What would they say to each other? What would this happen? And it's just fun. And that's what makes writing really, really fun. And I love creativity. I love making puzzles and figuring things out. How do things fit together? And so Larry, I love. He was an upstanding guy, and so he really ended up playing a little bit bigger part. He's a more minor character, but he was like me in that he started picking things up and then developing new talents out of nowhere. And so I really love Larry, but he became Hank. So now I love Hank. And I had a friend with that name, and I thought, yeah, it's a kind of a country name. It has a K in it. It's a good name. It's way better than Larry. Anyway, does that answer your question?
We just have a few more minutes before the library closes, but there is
Okay.
one more question here. And yes, Christy, who asked that question, said that thank you. Yes, the question was answered.
Okay, great. Oh, thanks, Christy.
Yep. One last question, and we just have a few minutes
Okay.
from Mary. Are your characters modeled after friends and family? I think you already somewhat answered that, but maybe you could add a little.
Well, no, just the names because it makes me feel familiar when I start out. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I go to that name book and I just start looking at it and then I pick names according to the character. The names can change when you realize who they are. So that would be the answer. Thanks, Mary, Jane.
All right.
And thanks to everybody who came. And thanks for supporting me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for sharing your story with us. It was a beautiful story.
Thank you. I always put my heart into my stories, even if there's imperfections, because it's my only my first novel, uh, but I but the heart part isn't. It's fine.
Absolutely. You've got thank yous in the comments, and
Thank you to
I'll
all of
say
you.
yes.
And thank you
Yep.
to you also, my moderator. You did a great
Of
job. I
course.
appreciate it.
Of course. Of course. And we'd be happy to have you back when you write your next novel or your next book,
Okay.
whatever it may be.
Yeah. Now next one's going to be set in Utah, and the ghost town will be a mining town during the Depression.
All
So
right.
it's going to be fun.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it. And I'm going to end the meeting here.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Patricia, and everyone have a good night.